Hi guys, today we're going to be looking at multiplying fractions and multiplying mixed numbers. This isn't completely new information to you. When you were in elementary school, you did look at multiplying unit fractions. You also looked at multiplying whole numbers by fractions. So we're just going to build on that understanding in a couple of different ways. First of all, though, we need to talk about how you can represent multiplication. Now that you're moving into older math and you're getting bigger, and we are going to be looking at more algebra concepts, no longer do we really want to use that x to represent multiplication, because as we start solving equations, an x is a variable, which is an unknown value, and so it can cause some confusion. So what we do when we are in 6th grade and working on some 7th grade material is we are going to represent multiplication by parentheses. So if you see two numbers that are in parentheses side by side, or even if it's one number in parentheses, so if we had 3/4 not in parentheses and 2/5 in parentheses, that means you're multiplying. Sometimes we'll also use what's referred to as the dot, what I call the dot. And normally it doesn't have this rectangle around it. For some reason, when the program transferred over, it put a box there instead of a dot. So it's really just almost like a hovering period in the air. And that represents multiplication. I try not to use the dot as frequently. I want you used to seeing it in parentheses. So basically what you can assume is, as a mathematician, if you have two numbers and there's not an operation sign, 9 times out of 10, you're going to be multiplying. So let's look at how to actually solve this multiplication problem of 3/5 times 2/3. There's actually two ways. I'm going to rewrite the problem so I can show you how you can solve this in two ways. So when I'm going to multiply, I am always going to multiply across. So it's going to be numerator times numerator, denominator times denominator. So numerators are the numbers that are in the top part of the fraction. They're telling us what part of the whole we're referring to. The denominators are in the bottom of the fraction, and that tells us how many parts are in the whole or how many parts are in the set. So all we then have to do is multiply across. 3 times 2 is 6, and 5 times 3 is 15. You might have seen this fraction on your warm-up today. Well, as always, when we end up with a fraction, we need to look at it and decide if it can be simplified. Your fractions always need to be in simplest form. 6/15 absolutely can be simplified. Both 6 and 15 can be divided by 3. So we will simplify this. 6 divided by 3 is 2, and 15 divided by 3 is 5. So that means that 3/5 times 2/3 is 2/5. Now, this is simplifying after we've multiplied. We can also look at how to simplify before we multiply, and I refer to that as cross-canceling. So what you do is you look diagonally and you ask yourself, is there anything that this numerator and this denominator can both be divided by? And the answer here is yes. 3 and 3 can both be divided by 3. So I'm actually going to cancel those down. I'm going to divide them by 3, and so this becomes a 1, and I'm going to divide this one by 3, and this becomes a 1. Then I'm going to look the opposite direction. Is there anything that 2 and 5 can both be divided by, so that I can cross-cancel this direction? And in this case, there's not. There's nothing that they both can be divided by. So my new problem becomes 1/5 times 2/1. And then I'm going to multiply across. 1 times 2 is 2. 5 times 1 is 5. And you'll see I get the same answer. You can simplify after, or you can cross-cancel before. My recommendation is always to cross-cancel before, because sometimes kids have a harder time working with the larger numbers to simplify. And so this makes it to where maybe you'll catch what needs to be simplified before. It might make your math a little bit easier. Sometimes you're going to have to multiply a whole number times a fraction, which again should just be a review. So in order to do that, we're going to take this 5 and we're going to write it as a fraction. A whole number can be written as a fraction because it's a rational number. And to write a whole number as a fraction, all you have to do is write it over 1. Remember, a fraction is another way to represent a division problem. So this says 5 divided by 1. 5 divided by 1 is 5. We haven't changed its value. We just wrote it as a fraction. So now I'm going to look at cross-canceling before I go any further. 1 and 2, there's nothing that they can be divided by. So let me look at 5 and 15. Yes, they both can be divided by 5. 5 divided by 5 gives me 1. 15 divided by 5 gives me 3. So now my problem is my problem is 1 over 1 times 2 over 3. 1 times 2 is 2. 1 times 3 is 3. So that gives me 2/3. One more problem to show you. Sometimes you're going to have a mixed number. This is 2 1/2 being multiplied by 4 2/5. A mixed number is a fraction that has a whole number and a decimal. So in order to multiply this, we have to convert these mixed numbers to improper fractions. Improper fractions are greater than 1, just as mixed numbers are greater than 1. And they actually end up with a numerator that has a larger number in it than the denominator because they are greater than 1. So some kids tend to think that all you have to do is multiply the whole number by the whole number and the fraction by the fraction. That is not true. That does not give you the correct answer. So what you have to do is use, I call it around the world, and multiply the denominator times the whole number and add the numerator. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 plus 1 is 5. So 2 1/2 is the same as 5 over 2. And I'm going to do the same thing with this other mixed number. 5 times 4 is 20. 20 plus 2 is 22. So then I have 22 over 5. And then it's the same process that we were just using. So I'm going to see, can I cross cancel here? 2 and 22? I absolutely can. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 22 divided by 2 is 11. So then I always check the other way. 5 and 5, yes, we can cross cancel these by 5. 5 divided by 5 is 1. 5 divided by 5 is 1. So now my new problem is 1 over 1 times 11 over 1. 1 times 11 is 11. 1 times 1 is 1. So here I have 11 over 1. This is not in simplest form. Just like earlier we changed 5 into a fraction, this actually represents 11. It's 11 divided by 1, which is 11. Sometimes when you multiply fractions, you end up with whole numbers.